Today's quest is to take the iris pattern and try to turn it into a mid-bust pattern. Let's see how the mock-up looks and then we'll render judgment on the job that I did. Hello friends and welcome back. I'm Shannon Makes, historical customer by day, circus artist by night, and today we're going to be making a corset. I'll go through the whole process with you from patterning to mock-up to final garment. Now, I started on the patterning for this corset back in January, and in the following months I tweaked the pattern, made a couple mock-ups, and now I'm ready to make the final version. I knew I wanted a corset from roughly 1906, both for my Edwardian Miss Frizzle, which if you haven't seen that video, you should check it out after this. I'm using the wearable mock-up of this pattern in order to get that amazing silhouette. And the pattern I originally chose was the Tulip from Aranea Black. She's known for making great, well-graded patterns with clear instructions. They're all free, and the Tulip dates to exactly 1906, so it was perfect. But then things all changed in early January when my friend Aura came to visit and they brought with them their version of Aranea's Iris corset. So let's go hear a little bit about what happened next and why my plans sort of changed. Aura was talking about how both they and V have had really good luck with this corset pattern, giving an amazing silhouette. And then I was like, okay, well, can I try it on? Because even though it's not even vaguely my size, I would like to see if it has the same effect on me because I am notoriously hard to give a waistline to. So I want to try it on. Aura let me. It was amazing. It was stunning. I actually, for the first time in my life, had a noticeable waistline. It was shocking. So then I said, okay, well, maybe I should be making this corset for my cosplay needs instead. The problem is that the iris, the one that Aura has, is only an underbust pattern, and for my purposes I really want a mid-bust, partly because I'm going to be filming myself and putting it on the internet and I would like my nipples covered, but also just because it's a little bit more like period accurate. So today's quest is to take the iris pattern and try to turn it into a mid-bust pattern. So there used to be instructions on Aranea's website about how to do this, but the whole website is down. It's not even on the Wayback Machine. It's completely erased from existence. So I'm basically kind of winging it. I am taking all the pieces from the underbust pattern and extending the lines up to resemble a mid-bust, and I am actually using 1906 mid-bust pattern to kind of help in that process. It's kind of giving me a good guideline. I've cut them both out, both the underbust and the mid-bust, cut them both out in my size, and then now I'm kind of using the mid-bust as a guideline for how far up I should extend the underbust, and like is sort of as a guideline I measured the total circumference at the top line of the mid-bust, and I'm using that to guide the total circumference theoretically of these pattern pieces once they've been extended. So that's where we're at right now. It seems to be going quite well, but I'm only 3 pieces in and I haven't even made a mock-up, so my enthusiasm might be misplaced. Let's see how the mock-up looks and then we'll render judgment on the job that I did. So first I extended all the iris pieces until they were the same height as the tulip corset. Then I went through all the mid-bust pieces and measured how wide they were at that top edge and added that together to give me a rough guideline of what the finished circumference of the new iris corset should be. This was just a guideline rather than a strict target because the tulip corset has a very dipping sweetheart style neckline that I didn't want to replicate, but it was still really helpful in guiding my patterning process. When I saw that the total circumference of the new iris corset was significantly smaller than the tulip, I went through and added a bit more width onto each piece until it was much closer to the 53 centimeters of the original. Then I started in on my mock-up, and the only fabric I had on hand that was even vaguely suitable was some white denim material, which, you know, it wasn't ideal, but I thought it would be good enough for a first impression. I traced out all my pieces, then added a generous seam allowance to make modifications easier, and I also made sure to mark both the waistline and the hip line, both for the placement of the waist tape, but also just using them as registration notches to line all the pieces up. Then everything was sewn together and I was able to reuse the lacing strips from my athletic corset to save on time and grommets. Well, it's maybe not my most gorgeous work, but I think it's gonna be just fine as a starting point. So having made the mock-up and then gone back and looked at the footage carefully from when I tried it on and kind of trying to study what some of the issues were, you can see that the waistline has a slightly too large gap, but that the top and the bottom are clearly, the lacing gap is teeny. And I think part of the problem for that is that I have a waist tape in the waistline, so it is unable to stretch out, but there's no similar thing in any of the rest of the corset, and that fabric does have a tiny bit of stretch in it, unfortunately. It's not great, but it was the best that I could find. So we've got a couple things going on. We've got the fact that the fabric is stretching, also the fact that, you know, it was pretty normal back then. You just take a corset that fits your waistline and pad out to the ideal silhouette, you know, bust improvers, hip pads, all that stuff. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I've gone back and adjusted the pattern slightly, made it slightly larger just so that theoretically the lacing gap at the waist should be closer to 2 inches, and I've found a much better fabric. I've got this brown canvas that has significantly less stretch than the white one, and I think I'm just gonna sew this corset up as if it was a final product. I mean, okay, I'm not gonna go back and do like flossing, probably not to that level of detail, but it's going to be a very wearable mock-up. That way I can use it to take measurements for my jumper for the Miss Frizzle cosplay, and then I can go back after I've worn this for a little bit and kind of seen what I like about it, what I don't like about it, how it fits, can go back and modify the pattern if it needs to be modified, and then make a nice pretty version of it. So that's the game plan right now. It has been sized up slightly in the waist, so the waist should fit. And then other than that, I kind of just tried to keep the historical lines of everything. I didn't want to mess too much with the lines of the corset just because, like, if it doesn't fit me in the bust, I'm just gonna pad it out until it fits the corset. Like, I'm gonna fit my bust to the corset instead of the other way around, because that's how you're gonna get that nice silhouette. So then I went ahead and jumped right into sewing my wearable mock-up, and we'll take a look at that in a second. But first, I'd like to introduce you to today's sponsor, Kitsch. And I'm super excited about this one because I've actually been wanting to try shampoo bars for quite a while. They've been on my radar for a long time just because they're so much better for the environment, and the fact that Kitsch is not only environmentally friendly, but also female owned and founded was a huge part of the reason I decided to give their hair care a try. And I have to say, I'm super happy with the results. I've been using their rice water protein shampoo and conditioner bars, which help strengthen hair and prevent breakage, which, as somebody who has very thin hair that's constantly up in a ponytail, is a huge bonus. They don't contain any sulfates, parabens, or phthalates, they're vegan, and they're also Leaping Bunny certified, which, as the former owner of a pet rabbit, I highly endorse. His name was Bilbo Baggins, he was a Holland Lop, and he was super cute. Each bar is estimated to save 2 plastic bottles of traditional liquid shampoo or conditioner, and since I only wash my hair about once a week, this bar should last me a really, really long time. They also make this handy self-draining shower caddy, which is great because it means that your bars don't get soggy and they last even longer. It's super stylish and classy, and also made out of eco-friendly recycled material. If you'd like to give Kitsch a try, you can follow the link in the description and use my code for 25% off. They ship not only to the US, but also to over 27 countries internationally, such as Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and more. Plus, they also offer subscriptions for an even better discount. So thank you to Kitsch for sponsoring this video, and now let's go take a look at that wearable mock-up. Hello friends, today, at just this moment, I have finished sewing up my corset. This is my wearable mock-up that I've got right now. I have not tried it on, actually, since the first mock-up that you saw in white. That one had, as you saw, some flaws, so I tweaked the pattern, and this is the mock-up version number 2, and I have not tried it on at any point. Honestly, I probably should have tried it on with the lacing strips before I went ahead and like threw all the grommets in here, but I kind of got carried away, just wanted to be done with the whole process, and now it's done. I bound to the top and the bottom. Actually, there's one part that's not done yet, and that is this very front edge here. My busk is being held in with safety pins. Because I still don't have a zipper foot and I was too lazy to do it by hand. I really want to try this on because I'm kind of excited about it. I think it's gonna hopefully give a really nice silhouette. You guys are gonna see it for the first time at the same time that I see it because I'm gonna try it on right now. I do have a bunch of socks right here because I'm anticipating that it's gonna need some padding. I know it's gonna need some padding in the hips. So that's the plan. This is all laced up. It's ready to go. I'm just gonna try it on. Maybe we can put you down here. I think you're gonna be able to see things a bit better that way. Honestly, I'm pretty satisfied with how it looks so far. It's definitely giving me a pretty good Edwardian shape. I feel like it could have a little bit more accentuation in the hips, but I think also that I did not maybe necessarily put the socks at the best spot, the ideal placement, but honestly, all things considered, it's more of a waistline than I normally have, so I'm not gonna complain. I just looked at the lacing gap in the mirror here. Looks pretty good too, looks pretty darn even all the way down. I do think I'm gonna need a little bit in the way of like bust improvers because I have a little bit of space in here and I'm supposed to have bust improvers anyway because honestly, for a wearable mock-up, I am quite pleased. It seems like the adjustment that I did, turning the underbust, which like the pattern stopped kind of right about here, turning it into the mid-bust worked pretty well. Yeah, just gonna wear it around for a while, get comfortable, break it in, and by the time I go to make the actual real version of this, I feel like I'm gonna have a better idea of what I like, what I don't like, if I need to tweak some things. All in all though, I'm calling this a fantastic hands down success for a wearable mock-up. And it was a great success. I made sure to wear it for at least a few days. I wore it all during the making of the Miss Frizzle jumper. You can see that I in fact have it on in a lot of the shots and it was really comfortable. I had a great range of motion and the silhouette was clearly on point. So honestly, I don't think I'll need to make any adjustments besides maybe sewing the busk in properly because I never actually did that. I literally filmed that whole reveal with sewing pins holding in my busk. And that is going to bring us to the present day. I have a pattern that I'm really happy with and I just need to cut it out of the real fabrics and assemble it all. This time maybe with some flossing, a little lace, and a bit more precision, but it should generally be a very fun and relaxing process. Now for materials, I'll be using a plain white coutil on the inside and then this lovely dusty lavender cotton on the outside. So nothing super fancy in the way of materials. The coutil is maybe a little bit fancy, but it's also pretty important to keep the structural integrity of the corset. But the cotton, it's just nice, solid quilting cotton. I'll dress it up a little bit with some flossing, maybe some cute lace, but I'm trying to keep it pretty simple here. I kind of love that this one is very practical and I'm not afraid of handling it or wearing it. It's a little bit beat up and definitely broken in, and I absolutely love that. Now the cotton is already washed, the coutil is not, and what I'm going to do, I'm not going to wash it, but I am going to steam shrink it. So that way as I make the corset and I iron all the pieces, nothing shrinks up oddly on me and throws my measurements out of whack. So we're going to take the fabrics, gonna go over to the ironing board, and then we can start cutting everything out. One thing that's quite important when you're laying your pattern pieces out on your fabric is paying attention to where they're sitting in relation to the grain of your fabric, especially if you want a corset that's smooth and relatively wrinkle-free. And I'm not going to be the one to tell you how you should place your fabric on your grain line. What I've chosen to do is I am placing my waistline running perpendicular to the selvage, simply because that's what I did on my mock-up and that worked really well. That corset was really smooth, so I'm just trying to replicate that here. And it's pretty easy to do that when you're working over here right next to the selvage. You can just measure the waistline, make sure it's nice and perpendicular. That's pretty easy. But once you start drifting over here into the middle of the fabric, that gets significantly harder because you're trying to reference the selvage, which is, you know, sometimes a yard away. So one trick I've been doing that's been working really well is first I'll take both sides of one panel of the corset. So this is piece one, the right side and the left side. I drew those out with their seam allowances, and then I very carefully measured and marked a line, which you can see here, which is perfectly parallel to the selvage. So now when I go to do panel 2, instead of trying to reference my waistline against the selvage, which is way over here, I can now reference it against this line, and it has the same effect, but it's so much easier. And then I've just been repeating that as I go across. Panel 1, draw a line. Panels 2, draw a line. Panels 3, etc., etc. And as long as you measure carefully, this technique has been working really well for me, especially on a fabric like this, where it's a really dense weave, really small, fine threads. It's very hard for me to see with the naked eye where the grain line is. And that will be one good thing about switching over to use the coutil, is that the grain line is so strong and so prominent. I don't think I'm going to have to use this trick on it. Everything is all cut out, and I've gone ahead and sorted all of my fabric into piles based on which panel they are in the corset, and I'm hoping that is going to help the assembly process go a bit smoother and potentially avoid some mistakes, particularly because there are several panels of this corset which look very similar, as I discovered when I was sorting them out. So hopefully having them already arranged like this is going to prevent a mistake in the order of assembly later on. And because I'm going to be assembling this using the welt method, that means I'm going to be starting with the center front and working my way around to the center back. It's going to go the smoothest this way. And that means that I need to start by getting the busk out of this corset so that I can reuse it on the new one. The one problem though is that I still do not have a zipper foot. It has been several years. I should probably just bite the bullet and go get one, and I will. But just not right now. I'm kind of on a roll. I don't want to break it and run some errand. So instead, I'm going to temporarily baste the busk in for now. That way I can keep going, and then I'll just go back and sew it in more permanently later once I get the correct foot. So let's start by getting the busk out of this corset and into the new one. While I had the busk out, I figured I might as well mark its placement in the mock-up on my pattern pieces. It's not like I'm planning on making a zillion more of the same pattern, but it also seemed like it wouldn't hurt, and you never know, future Shannon might thank me. Now that I have one half of the corset more or less assembled, I thought it would be a good time to go through some of the tips and techniques that I found worked well for me when making this. So first of all, starting at the front and working my way around to the back led to a much cleaner and easier finish of the busk portion. I did it the other way around when I made my wearable mock-up, and obviously it worked well enough, but I would definitely recommend, especially if you're doing the welt method of construction, to start with the front. So then the workflow I developed was I'd just grab whatever the next panel was and lie the paper pattern out next to the corset so I knew which way the pieces should go. On this half of the corset, the pattern pieces should all have the printed side facing up, and on the next half, all of the printed sides will go down. Once I was sure my panels were going the right way, I'd flip over the new panels, sandwiching the previous ones in the middle and pin all 4 layers together. I started by lining up the 3 registration marks I'd made. In my case, that's the mid-hip, the waistline, and one of the shorten/lengthen marks. These were super helpful landmarks, and I actually think I'll go through and add a 4th registration mark for the second half because it really sped up the sewing process. Then originally I was using these little sewing clips to try to hold everything all lined up and in place, but honestly I found that they didn't work so well, especially on the more curved sections of the corset, so I pretty quickly switched to basting all of the layers together. As I would sew them up, I'd check to make sure that my needle was passing through the stitching line on all 4 layers. Is this strictly necessary? It kind of depends on the level of precision you're striving for in your own corset. For me, I really like having that level of precision. It satisfies me a lot, so for me it was definitely worth it, but I also know that many people would prefer to skip this step and sacrifice a bit of precision for the sake of time, and that's equally fine. To each their own. I can only share with you what I enjoyed doing and what worked for me personally. Next, I'd run the panel through the machine and then I clipped all the seam allowances, and here I made an executive decision to try not to cut the inner and outer layers at the same position to try and avoid weak spots in the boning channels. So while it took a little bit more time, I would go in and notch the 2 innermost layers first and then notch the outermost layers, trying to sort of stagger the notches so nothing was in the same place. Then I would run the whole thing through the iron, and what I found worked best for me was to iron the fashion fabric side first and then the couture side. Otherwise, I found that if I did the couture first, I'd often end up wrinkling my much softer, more flexible quilting cotton in the process, and it just made more work for me in the end. I will say that having this tailor's ham was actually super useful. The fact that it actually looks like a ham doesn't add to its effectiveness, but it sure adds some levity to the process. And if you're interested in getting your own, I do sell them. They come as a whole kit with 1 ham and 1 sausage, plus their respective matching wool layers, so you can assemble them for yourself at home and iron all the curves you could possibly come across in your sewing journey. They're available on my coffee shop, which I'll link in the description. So the ham was super useful for getting around all those curves, and once that step was done, the last thing I did was to sew a boning channel just alongside the seam I'd just sewn. So that first seam made up the first wall of the boning channel, and the second line of stitches then made the second wall. Plus, I found it additionally helped to anchor those 2 layers of fabric in place relative to each other, which then made adding the next panel a bit easier, and I think it's going to give a smoother result in the finished corset. Then I just repeated that whole process for the next panel and the next one and so on until I was out of panels. And now this half is nearly done. I'm just missing some grommets and then 1 more boning channel on the other side of the grommets, and then I'm going to repeat the whole process all over again on the second half. Now that both halves of my corset are done, here are a couple things that I forgot to mention before. First of all was that I made sure to measure out my seam allowances so that they would be large enough to extend past the far edge of the boning channels. This means that my whole boning channel has not 1 but 2 layers of couture in it, which I'm thinking will help make them extra strong and also maybe prevent the bones from poking through. I was afraid that if there was only 1 layer of couture and 1 layer of cotton, that the bones might eventually rub and wear a hole through the purple quilting cotton. The other thing was how I finished the back edge, and for that I just marked where the finished edge of the corset should be, then ironed both layers under at that point. The couture gets folded down first, then the purple cotton wraps around the back edge like so, hiding the rod edge of the couture. This edge here will be held down by the grommets, and again, I measured this back seam allowance to be large enough so that once it was folded under, it extends past the grommets, meaning that they have not 1 but 2 layers of couture to sort of grip into, and again, I'm thinking that's going to make them hold stronger and just be more sturdy. Speaking of grommets, the next step is to insert them, and originally I was gonna go with these rather oversized white ones because I do like the contrast they provide, but then I remembered that I wanted to add this layer of lace along the top edge. Now, if you've been on the channel for a while, you'll at least suspect that I'm not huge into the frills and the floof, well, apart from the corgi, but I kind of liked the subdued colors and vaguely austere nature of this lace, so I figured I'd put one line of it along the top edge, and looking at it, the white grommets, they just really clash with the lace. So figured since I'm going to need a zipper foot anyways, I'll go on a short field trip, see if the same store that carries the zipper foot also has some grommets, and try to find something that matches the metal of the busk. And if I can find that, then that's what I'd prefer to use. It turns out that store was closed all weekend, so instead I got a jump start on some binding, and I prefer to sew my binding onto the front first by machine, then finish the inside by hand. Before I could finish up all the binding, I had to take my boning out of the original mock-up and insert it into the new version. And when people talk about seasoning your corset, this is what they mean. Look at the curve that this boning has taken from only a few days of wearing it. I transferred over all the boning, then added some nice finishing touches such as sewing on the lace, adding all those grommets, and adding some nice flossing to keep that boning securely in place. Now, I wish I could say that the zipper foot was a non-issue, but unfortunately my local store didn't have a foot that would fit my machine, so I had to get creative, and I thought my solution was maybe worth sharing with you in case anyone else finds themselves in a similar position. So the problem with using a regular foot is that half of the foot will sit up on the metal of the busk, but the other side doesn't make proper contact with the fabric or the feed dogs, and that makes it really hard to get nice clean stitches. So that's why people tend to use a zipper foot, because it allows you to get really close to the edge of the busk while maintaining full contact with the fabric. My solution to this was to just go find another busk, and yes, I know not everybody just has an extra busk laying around, but you could equally use thin cardboard or a few sheets of paper, some plastic packaging, whatever you have that's of a similar thickness to the first busk, and to use that to raise the other side of the foot to approximately the same height. And while this was a bit finicky and slow, and I had to work the hand wheel by hand at some parts, it turned out pretty well. It's not 100% perfect, there are definitely a couple hiccups in my stitching line, but it's definitely good enough for me, and I would highly recommend this technique if you find yourself in a similar pinch. So here it is. Is it perfect? No. Despite having done 2 mock-ups, there are still some flaws in this one, and some lessons were learned, but I'm still quite pleased with the way it turned out. It is a little lumpy around the curves because, well, I'm still jamming socks in there. I do plan to custom make some padding that will live in the corset and fill it out perfectly, but that'll have to wait for another week. If you like this video and you want to make my day, give the video a like and maybe even subscribe. If you're into Patreon, my links are in the bio, and your support means I can make even more videos like this one. Let me know in the comments if you were going to make this pattern, what would your perfect color scheme look like? Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video.